Hello and welcome to the Prime to Perform YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Ben. I'm one of the founders of Prime to Perform, where we help performers train smarter, feel better, and ultimately perform at your best. This is part 2 of our 5-part series on how to become an unstoppable performer. And last time we spoke all about training. We went into our methods, kind of the real fundamentals of what we include in our clients' training programs. We really break down exactly how to make your gym sessions effective and efficient. So if you haven't seen that video, I definitely recommend going and watching over that. And today we're talking about something that I genuinely believe is one of the biggest missing pieces in a performer's career, and that is nutrition. Now, before you click away, I know this is in a slightly more presentation style. This isn't going to be super confusing. We actually have tried to record this video quite a few times, and something that we were trying to do was go into loads of the nuance in terms of nutrition and how to fuel yourself effectively and break it down into so many different pieces, and the video was going on and on and on and on, and we just thought, hang on a minute, let's just simplify this as much as possible and just give you some real practical advice that you can take away and implement straight away into your day-to-day routines. And I think that's super important because there's so much going on social media about what foods are good, what foods are bad, what you should be having, what you shouldn't be having, and it just gets so confusing. You have no idea what to be including in your diets. You get so worried and anxious about food, and we want to try and simplify it as much as possible. And if there's one thing that we've realized after working with hundreds of performers over the last couple of years at Prime to Perform, is that performers are putting the work in. You're training, you're doing rehearsals, you're turning up to dance classes. So we know that the problem isn't effort. The problem is just having a clear framework guide that you can just follow on a day-to-day basis that is just going to cut all the noise and just simplify it for you, because as we say, effort isn't the problem, and it's not that you don't want to be fueling correctly, it's just that there's so many myths and there's so much information out there that it just gets so overwhelming and so confusing. So we thought today we would actually just go over one of the fundamental things that we always teach our clients and our performers right at the start of their journey with us, and that is the performer's plate. And I think with nutrition, we always like to go back to this analogy that your nutrition, it underpins absolutely everything. And we always get taught how to sing, how to dance, how to act, but we're never actually taught how to recover and how to be fueling the body that does all of those things. So this is where we're going to just simplify it in this video, and we're just going to go over some key fundamentals that you need to be understanding and implementing on a daily basis. So this is the performer's plate, and this is honestly one of the simplest but most effective nutrition tools we've ever created and we ever use with our clients, because instead of worrying about calories, about macros, about whether you should be eating before 6 o'clock or whether a food group is good or bad for you, we just simplify it and we look at what a balanced meal actually looks like. So the performer's plate is made up of 4 things. We would recommend that roughly half your plate is carbohydrates. Around a quarter is protein, then we include some sources of dietary fats, and then finally we want at least 1 portion of fruit and 1 portion of veg with each meal. That's it, that's the framework. I know that seems super simple. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that, of course, but that's where we want to be aiming for. That's what we want to be looking at with every single one of our main meals. Now, as I said in the intro, there's so much nuance to nutrition. There's lots of things like the glycemic index, meal timings, in terms of different macro splits. Of course, if you have any body composition goals as well, that will absolutely play into it. But this is just something that is completely universal. It doesn't matter kind of what point in your career you are, whether you're at drama school, if you're touring, you're from cruise ships, anything like that. This should be the absolute baseline of what you want to be doing in your main meals on a day-to-day basis. So once we understand the kind of key principles that come with this, instead of worrying about, can I eat pasta, or should I be avoiding bread, or should I be cutting out sweets or cookies or chocolates, you can literally just ask yourself these simple questions. Have I got a good source of carbohydrates? Is it filling up most of my, or at least half of my plate? Have I got some good protein in there? Have I got some healthy fats? And then have I got pieces of fruit and vegetables in there? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably doing a pretty good job. So let's start with carbohydrates, because this tends to be the nutrient that performers fear the most. Obviously, we see online things like keto diets. We have people telling us to cut out white bread and all this stuff. And here we actually want to kind of go into a little bit more detail about why we want so many carbs in our diet. So if you think about a performer's average day, you tend to be walking around a fair bit. You're on your feet, you're dancing, you're learning choreography, you're concentrating, you're singing, you're acting, you're on stage. And all of these activities are incredibly demanding, not only from a physical, but also a mental point of view. And where does that energy come from? Well, it comes from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are our body's preferred source of energy for anything that is even remotely intense in nature. So anything that's above a brisk walk, for example, is actually going to be fueled by carbohydrates. Your brain also runs on glucose, which is broken down carbohydrates. So when you're rehearsing, you're learning lots of choreography, not only is your body going to be using a lot of that for energy, but also your brain needs that glucose. It needs that energy to function well and for you to retain all of that choreography or lines or songs. So our bodies store carbs as something called glycogen. You can think of glycogen as your body's fuel tank. So every time you do a dance class, a gym session, a performance, you're dipping into that fuel tank. Now imagine you're driving your car around all week but never stopping for petrol. Eventually you're going to run out, you're going to fatigue, that car is going to stop working. And that is exactly the same with performers. If you're not having a good amount of carbohydrates, it's like trying to perform on an empty tank. So that's why performers, and you might have found this yourself, you often feel tired, you feel flat, you might struggle to concentrate, everything seems harder than it should. And that's a clear indication from your body and from your brain that it's asking for more fuel. And that's one of the biggest shifts that I love performers to make, is to stop seeing carbs as something to avoid and actually start kind of viewing them as your fuel source, your primary fuel source, because they're not the enemy. They are the thing that is going to give you energy, focus, and help you recover as well from all of your sessions. So when we're talking about carbohydrates, we're talking about foods like rice, pasta, potatoes, sweet potatoes, bread, wraps, bagels, porridge, fruit, cereals, the list goes on, things like beans and lentils, of course, as well. And for this presentation, we're not going to get too much into the nitty-gritty about when to be having different types of carbs, but with each of your meals, you absolutely need a good source of carbohydrates. So again, it doesn't need to be what foods were allowed, what foods were not allowed. Simply ask yourself, am I fueling for the demands I'm placing on my body? And a lot of the demands that you're placing on your body as a performer is going to be fueled by carbohydrates. So there we have it. Make sure that with each of your meals, at least half of that plate is going to be filled with carbs. Now, it is important to say here as well that obviously when you're eating different foods, a food isn't necessarily just a pure carbohydrate. It's going to have some protein, some dietary fats in it. And of course, when you have a meal, things are going to be mixed up. You're not going to have a perfect half of your plate being pasta or rice or something like that. But yeah, when you're kind of creating your meals, or if you were to separate everything out, we'd want roughly half of that plate being carbohydrates. Next, we have protein. Now, of course, when people start going to the gym, the first thing that people tend to think about is having loads of protein shakes and protein yogurts and stuff like that. And yes, for dancers and performers, it is super, super important that we are having a good amount of protein throughout the day and with each meal. We do still find that a lot of people are under eating protein, but equally we find that people often place almost too much importance on protein and actually tend to then not eat quite enough carbs. So again, when we're looking at this performer's plate, half of that plate being carbohydrates, that's the biggest portion of our macronutrient split. But the second biggest portion is protein. Now, protein is absolutely vital for growth and repair of your muscle mass. So every dance class you do, every rehearsal, every strength session, you are adding stress to your muscles, and we need to give ourselves the amino acids from protein that helps that muscle grow and repair. It's as simple as that. If we don't have enough protein from our diet, we're really going to struggle to recover from our sessions, from our dance classes and rehearsals. So when you eat protein, that protein is digested and it's broken down into amino acids, and those amino acids are the building blocks of muscle. So again, we need that protein. It's kind of like a house, right? The individual amino acids are like bricks, and we add all of those bricks together and we create a house, or we create muscle. One thing to kind of talk about is the difference between complete and incomplete protein sources. This is something that often comes up with our vegetarian and our vegan clients. So to kind of clear that up, protein is these kind of building blocks called amino acids, and there are 20 amino acids in total, but 9 of them are known as essential amino acids. And they're called essential because our bodies can't make them on their own, so we need to get them through our diet. So a complete protein source contains all 9 of those essential amino acids in sufficient amounts. And these are typically your meats, so any type of meat, your fish, your dairy, your eggs, so normally from animal-based protein sources. There are also a few plant-based proteins that are complete, so things like soy products are, things like tempeh, quinoa tends to be a complete protein source, but a lot of vegetarian and vegan foods are incomplete in nature, which means they don't have all of those 9 essential amino acids. So foods like beans, lentils, chickpeas, nuts and seeds tend to fall into that incomplete category. So if you are veggie or vegan, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to really stress about it. It just means that you simply need to combine different protein sources in your meals. It doesn't have to be within a single meal, although we would suggest that. So if you're having something like tofu, also pair it with maybe some chickpeas or something like that. Or if you're having a chili curry, maybe you add some beans and then you also have some edamame on the side or something like that. So you're combining 2 different protein sources just to try and cover your bases. But again, we don't need to be really breaking this down. We just want to be going for a good source of protein with each meal. Typically, we would say anywhere from maybe 20 up to 40 grams, 50 grams of protein within a meal is perfect. Something that we often go back to is kind of your palm size. So typically with each of your meals, if you were to have 1 to 2 palms worth of protein, that's normally a good amount. That's probably going to be in line with your height, your weight, your age, how much protein you specifically need, unless you have freakishly large hands or freakishly small hands or something like that. Kind of 1 to 2 palms worth of protein is probably a good amount. So again, protein, incredibly important for growth and repair. If you are noticing that you're always sore, if you're noticing that you're not recovering at all and you have to spend loads and loads of those time stretching and foam rolling and massaging and stuff like that, probably an indication that you're not getting enough energy and you're not getting enough protein for the actual recovery process. So next we have dietary fats. We absolutely need dietary fats on a day-to-day basis and within your diets, but we typically don't need them in such large quantities. I think something that is really important to touch on here is that dietary fats tend to be really demonized because the kind of thought process that dietary fats are going to make you fat has been around for years and years and years, and this just isn't the case. In terms of body fat, kind of putting on body fat, that simply comes from eating too many calories or eating more calories than your body is burning, and that can come from any macronutrient or any nutrient in general. So it's not that eating dietary fats is going to make you fat. That's just not the case at all. In fact, we really do need dietary fats within our diet on a daily basis. Dietary fat is absolutely essential. In fact, every single cell in your body contains dietary fat. Your brain is made up of about 60% fat. Your hormones and hormone creation rely on dietary fat. And your body actually needs fat to absorb important vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K. And for biological female performers in particular, eating a good amount of healthy dietary fats each day, again, is super important for hormone production and regulation and for maintaining a healthy menstrual cycle. So fats aren't something that we want to avoid, they are something that we actually want to include. It doesn't mean that we need loads and loads and loads of them, but really good healthy dietary fats are things like olive oil, nuts and seeds, stuff like oily fish, so salmon, mackerel, that kind of stuff. Avocados are a dietary fat, and they're all really healthy fats that we do want to be included in each of our meals. So with dietary fats, we tend to categorize them into a few different sections, and it's important that we just go into this briefly again. We're not going into too much of the nuance between macro splits and food composition here, but it is important with dietary fats just to have a look at these different categories. So the first one is unsaturated dietary fats, and these are generally considered the healthiest sources of fat. So that is stuff like your avocados, your nuts and seeds, your olive oil, oily fish, things that are super high in omega-3, omega-6, and they are the fats that are going to support things like heart health, overall well-being, hormone production, that kind of stuff. So very important that we include those in our diet. Then we have saturated fats. Saturated fats are found in things like butter, cheese, kind of fattier cuts of meat, and those foods absolutely can form part of a well-balanced diet. And the goal isn't elimination, the goal isn't to cut those out, it's just a little bit more balanced. So Those we typically want to have slightly less of. And then finally we have trans fats, and trans fats are artificially produced fats that are found in highly processed foods. And they are the foods that we typically want to minimize. So that is lots of your deep fried things, typically things like your sweets, chocolates, or like battered things. And those are dietary fats that we do want to try and avoid where possible. Again, within social media, within online forums and stuff like that, there is a lot of scaremongering that goes on around things like trans fats. And actually, when you look at the research, it is way, way, way more important to be physically active, to be healthy, and to have good heart health and to be able to go on a run and to be training. And as performers, we are typically very physically active. So way more important that we actually look at health as a global thing rather than just really demonize certain things. But absolutely, trans fats are one of those things that if we can avoid, there is good research to say that is beneficial, but not to kind of scare you into never eating some fish and chips again, but just to say that actually, if we can have that once a week, that's probably better than having it every single day, for example. So now we're transitioning into micronutrients. So we have macro and micronutrients. Macros are the things we need in larger amounts, the things that we've been over already. So your carbohydrates, your protein, and your dietary fats. And now we're looking at micronutrients, so the things that we need in smaller amounts. And we really like this analogy of a car engine. So your macronutrients are the fuel. It's like the petrol in your engine, and the micronutrients are all of the components of that engine that allow the petrol to be used effectively. So without these components, the car just doesn't perform. It's like having all of the petrol but without the engine, and that's the same thing with our body. Micronutrients support hundreds of different processes in our body, things like energy production, recovery, immunity is a big one, bone health, muscle contractions, concentration, it helps with hormone function, so many different things. And micronutrients can be broadly divided into two main groups. We have vitamins and minerals. Now, we don't need to necessarily memorize them all, but it is important to understand a few key examples. So stuff like iron. Iron plays a crucial role in transporting oxygen around the body. Low iron levels can contribute to fatigue, to reduced energy levels, to poor performance. So again, super important for performers that we have a good amount of iron in our system. Obviously, people genetically might have low iron, so you might need to actually supplement with that. Things like vitamin D, super important as well, supports bone health, immunity, number of other important processes. And again, that is actually where supplementation can be super useful. As performers, we don't tend to be spending that much time outside, especially if you are like ourselves and live in the UK. We tend to not get that much sun either. So in that scenario, actually supplementing with a good high strength vitamin D would be amazing. And things like magnesium. So again, magnesium involved in hundreds of different processes throughout the body, and just goes to show how important vitamins and minerals are. Now, hearing all of that can sometimes make nutrition seem incredibly complicated. You stress about getting all of these different vitamins and minerals in. You hear things like iron, calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, folate, potassium, the list goes on and on. Thankfully, improving micronutrient intake doesn't require memorizing every vitamin and mineral and tracking things to the nth degree. One of the simplest solutions that we have is just eating a variety of different fruits and veggies. You may have heard of Eat the Rainbow. Now, I'm not talking about Skittles here, and whilst it is pretty cheesy, it is actually some solid advice. Different colours of different fruits and veggies typically contain different nutrients. So for example, green veggies often have loads of folate and magnesium in them. Orange veggies are rich in compounds that tend to support things like eye health. Red fruits and veggies contain various antioxidants, and actually purple fruits and veggies, things like beetroot, have lots of polyphenols. So again, the more variety that we can have, the wider range of nutrients we are going to consume. So we always say, if you can have at least 2 colours, at least 1 piece of fruit, at least 1 veggie within your main meals, that's going to be super beneficial. Now, a final thing just to touch on is fibre. And fibre is technically a type of carbohydrate, but unlike other carbs, it isn't actually fully digested by the body. Instead, it passes through our digestive system and provides a number of important health benefits. It helps with digestion, gut health, appetite regulation, blood sugar control, cholesterol management, and just overall long-term health. It's really, really useful to help you feel fuller and feel more satiated for longer, and that allows you to actually have a slightly more sustained energy level throughout your day. I always really like to press home the importance of fibre, because with gut health, it's such a thing at the moment. Obviously, things like prebiotics, probiotics, lots of different supplements floating around as well for gut health. It seems to be a real fad and craze within health and fitness at the moment. And although there is some good research for things like probiotics, one of the only things that everyone can agree on in terms of gut microbiome and gut health is that fibre is incredibly important. And there are two main types of fibre. We have soluble fibre and insoluble fibre. Soluble fibre is fibre that absorbs water and kind of forms like a gel-like substance in the digestive system. This can help support cholesterol levels and things like your blood sugar levels. And insoluble fibre tends to add bulk to your stool and helps again with healthy digestion and regular bowel movements. So both are super important, both are super beneficial. And if you're eating a variety of plant foods, you are going to be getting a good amount of fibre. But there are practical ways to increase your fibre intake. I think always adding 2 meals is really useful. So again, something like porridge, if you're having oats in the morning, can you add fruit and veggies to it? Can you add some nuts and seeds to the top? Can you add things like chia seeds to the top? Can you eat fruit with the skin on? So even stuff like kiwis, can you have the skin of a kiwi? If you're having a main meal and you're not doing anything particularly physically active straight after, then definitely opt for things like wholemeal bread or sourdough instead of white bread. So going for the slightly more unprocessed, more nutrient dense foods is super useful. So again, we don't need to get too bogged down, but fibre is really important. And if you are looking to improve your gut health, increasing your fibre content is actually the most effective and probably the cheapest way of doing so. So that is our performer's plate. Now again, that is a super simplified way of looking at nutrition, but again, it's really important that we stress that all of those nutrients are needed within a performer's diet. We need carbohydrates. That is our energy for all of your dance, all of your training, all of your strength work. That's going to be your primary energy source there. So super important we eat that, and then we replenish our glycogen stores. We replenish those carb stores in our muscles for the next day or the next class. So snacks, carby snacks are always really good as well. Again, we need carbs, we need protein. That's the real building blocks of muscle. We need that again to build strength, to recover from your dance, to ensure that you're not burning out, you're not getting fatigued, and you're not getting injured. We need dietary fats, yes, in slightly smaller quantities, but we do need that for hormone health, for hormone regulation, for your cells. Then we, of course, need our micronutrients and fibre. We need those vitamins, minerals, and fibre to support immunity, to support all of our bodily functions, and to keep us feeling healthy and, again, recovering well. So here we have a few different suggestions. Again, these are super simple things. Again, we didn't want to go into loads of the nitty-gritty about meal timings and carb composition and stuff like that, but here are just 6 different examples of how you could use the performer's plate. So stuff like the Nourish Bowl, we've got quinoa and sweet potatoes as our carbohydrate sources, we've got some turkey mince, then for our dietary fats we've got half an avocado, then some fruits and veggies. Again, super easy, super simple. If we can think of nutrition in this way when we're building our meals, we're just going to cover all bases. Stuff like your kind of power breakfast. We have 2 slices of sourdough. We're getting some fibre, some vitamins and minerals through that. That's going to take up roughly half our plate. Then we can have 3 scrambled eggs. Again, that's going to be about a quarter. Then we're going to look for some dietary fats. Nice and simple. This is just butter for this example that we're going to have on our toast. And then a piece of fruit and some veggies. Classic jacket potato. We're going to have, a baked potato, a tuna can as our protein source there, some cheese and sour cream for our dietary fats, and then a piece of fruit and some veg alongside. So again, it doesn't need to be really confusing. We just need each of those food groups within our main meals. So yeah, when you are creating meals, when you're cooking things, when you're thinking about what you're going to be eating for dinner over the next week, ask yourself, have I got a large amount of carbs? Have I got a source of protein? Have I got some healthy fats? And then have I got fruits and veggies in there? And if the answer is yes, then you are fueling really well. Because performers are athletes and athletes need correct fuel. If you found this video helpful, it would be amazing if you could give it a little like and subscribe because we have loads more videos coming, and again we'll go into slightly more of the detail, slightly more of the nuance around nutrition as well. And if you would like an even deeper dive, if you want to go into more of the science, if you want some more practical tips and actually how to really optimize stuff like meal timings and carb composition, then we've recently released our Performers Nutrition and Recovery Bundle, where I teach everything from the performer's plate, building balanced meals, to meal prep, to recovery, to supplementation, and the science behind performance nutrition. So I'll leave a link for that in the description. And yeah, we have all of these ebooks. We have these 6 resources. Stuff like the eating out guide is really, really useful if you're on a cruise ship. We have 15-minute meals. Again, we are normally very time poor. We don't have that much time in the day, so stuff like 15-minute meals is perfect. We also did a pro performance nutrition masterclass, which is an hour of us going into so much detail about nutrition. Again, we talk about stuff like the performance plate, like we've spoke about today, but we go into way more detail about the types of foods that you should be having at certain points during the day, and a little bit more about food composition as well, supplements and grocery guide in there as well for you. So dancers are athletes, and we need to start fueling and recovering like them. So definitely go and check that out. Again, I'll leave the link in the description below. But there we have it. Thank you so much for watching this video. We really hope that you found it helpful and useful, and cut through some of the noise and anxiety around nutrition, and just gave you a simple framework that you can follow and implement straight away.